So when was the last time you heard someone say, "I'm so stressed," even if they weren't actually stressed, but maybe just busy? Over the past years, we've seen what can almost be described as an inflation in the use of the term stress to describe feeling busy or under pressure. The problem with overusing the term stress is that it devalues the serious problem of actual stress. But is it even possible to be busy without experiencing a negative stress response? And how do you tell the difference between stress and busyness? These are some of the questions that we'll look into in this video. I'm Camilla, I'm a psychologist, and I'm on a mission to spread mental health awareness and to make better mental well-being available to more people. If you're new here, consider subscribing for more psychological insights, tips, and tools. In my everyday job as a psychologist, I help many people struggling with stress. Unfortunately, I often see that people seek out help for their stress really late and after they've experienced symptoms for a long time. I also see that they often experience a sense of shame and guilt when they finally do reach out to get help with their stress. I think that part of the reason for this can be found in the way many people are using the term stress and busyness interchangeably. Let's look at why. When we're calling busyness stress, we devalue the people who are experiencing actual stress. And by doing so, we take away the very important focus on real stress. What we tend to see is that the real warning signs of stress are drowned out because of the regular and very frequent claims of having stress. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. When the wolf finally did come, no one believed it because there'd been false warnings so many times before. Imagine that scenario in a workplace. If everybody's going around saying how stressed they are all the time, it's very likely that it'll get overlooked if we suddenly have a colleague who's actually experiencing real stress. And that might mean that they don't get the help they need early enough. In a similar way, if we're calling actual stress just busyness, then that implies that stress is not acceptable. I've actually helped workplaces that say they don't want to label anything as stress or they don't want to talk about stress out of the fear of causing more of it by talking about it. But that's not how it works. And by not acknowledging actual stress when it is there, we might run into problems. So one of the risks of downplaying real stress and just calling it busyness is that it becomes very much an individualized problem. And that can lead to a sense of shame and embarrassment for the people who do suffer from stress. Just yesterday, I had a client tell me that he felt like he should be able to handle the pressure at work without getting stressed. Another risk of not acknowledging stress and simply calling it being busy is that we just keep going and going in the same environment that's causing us to be stressed. This is where we'll typically see the stress escalate and we'll see a buildup of symptoms until we suddenly break down and can't function anymore. Our body simply forces us to stop if we ignore our stress symptoms for too long. So what are the differences between being busy and being stressed? The two can coexist, and we often see that people who are stressed are also busy. But we also see people who are not busy and still experience stress. For example, I had a client who was unemployed at the time of going through therapy. She was severely stressed even though she wasn't busy. In her case, it was the unpredictability of her future and all the worries and ruminations that came with that were the cause of her experiencing stress. At the same time, it's very possible to be busy without experiencing stress. When we're busy and being challenged, but at the same time feeling in control and like we're able to manage the challenges that we're facing, then we might experience what we call flow. By the way, if you're finding this video helpful at all, please give it a like. Simply giving it a like will help the video reach more people who might benefit from seeing it. And that will help me in my mission to make better mental well-being available to more people. Now let's look at this concept of flow for a minute. I'll illustrate it in this chart where we have our stressors on the y-axis. So that could be any challenges and demands that we face. And along the bottom here, we have our perceived coping abilities. So that can be our skills, our experiences, and our psychological coping abilities. If the stressors, the demands, are high and the perceived coping abilities are low, then we experience stress. We can also see that the bigger the stressors, so the more stressful situations that we find ourselves in, the more coping skills are required to not experience stress. Now, if on the other hand, our skills are far superior to the demands that we face, then we're likely to feel boredom and a frustration that we're not utilizing our full potential. Both of these two states can lead to an experience of stress. Now, the magic happens in between these two, when the balance between the challenges that we face and our perceived ability is just right. So it's not too challenging and it's not too easy. This is when we experience flow. When we're in the flow state, it's very possible to be busy and not have a negative stress response. So stress only tends to occur when we're assessing our coping ability or our skills to not be sufficient to deal with the challenges and the demands that we're facing. Another important point that I'd like to make is that we're generally fine being busy or under pressure for a while, even if the stressors are exceeding our perceived coping abilities, as long as this is for a short and limited time that's then followed by the opportunity to recover. I like to illustrate it like this. As long as any stressful period is followed by a recovery period, then we're generally fine and we won't experience any negative effects of stress. An example of this could be a client that I worked with in the past. He was an accountant and he knew that there were peaks throughout the year where he'd be really busy and he'd get pushed to and maybe even beyond the limit of what he was able to cope with. But because he knew that this was a manic 2-week window, and because they'd introduced the opportunity to have a vacation after the 2-week period, this had no negative effect on him and his colleagues and didn't cause them stress. This is good planning and this is good management of our resources. Sometimes we go through periods or we go through workloads that we know are going to be heavy, but as long as we plan for it, it doesn't need to cause us stress. And this is a perfect example of that. So the problem of stress only occurs when we see this imbalance between our demands and resources over a longer period of time. This is when we'll typically start to see a gradual build-up of stress symptoms. And that leads us nicely into the last point that I want to make today. How do we tell the difference between busyness and stress? Because one of the easiest ways to do this is to know and recognize the symptoms of stress. If we're simply busy, we won't experience any physical, cognitive, or behavioral symptoms of stress. When we should call it stress is when we start to experience symptoms, and particularly when those symptoms are persistent for more than a couple of weeks. It's really important to be able to know and spot the symptoms early so that we can stop and re-establish that balance between our demands and resources. The earlier we act on our symptoms, the easier it is to bring ourselves back on a healthy track again. I do have a video where I cover all the most common symptoms of stress. I'll make sure to link that in the end card so you can watch that next if you're unsure what symptoms to look out for. Stress is serious, and if left unchecked, it can lead to problems such as heart disease and high blood pressure. If you are experiencing symptoms of stress, please act sooner rather than later. You don't have to keep feeling like that, and it's time to start bringing your mental well-being back into balance. I post new videos on this channel every single week, and they all aim to promote mental health awareness and to help you improve your mental well-being. I'd love for you to subscribe so we can meet again. Thank you for watching, take care, and bye for now.